Natalia is a teacher trainer and CELTA tutor born in Russia, but currently based in Austria. She has been working in various teacher settings and cultural contexts and enjoys reflecting on her classroom experiences.
Hello.
Hey, there you are. Thanks for joining us, Natalia.
Hey, that's lovely being with you. Can you see and hear me well?
I can see and hear you well, so everybody should be able to see you just fine.
Fantastic. Shall I start?
Absolutely. I'll take off when you're here.
Okay, then hello everybody. I'm really happy that you are still here and that you're ready to devote your private time, especially on Sunday, to your professional development. As I was already introduced, I'm Natalia. I'm a teacher trainer, I'm a CELTA tutor, a Cambridge speaking examiner, an English teacher, of course. And my talk today will be useful for those who generally work with lower levels of students and those who help students prepare for speaking parts of different Cambridge exams. Give me a second, I will start my presentation. So, my topic today is motivating speaking activities for lower level learners. Why so? Why this topic? Because it's not rare that our students feel they're unable to function properly in a foreign language in real life situations, and language classes are supposed to help them develop their speaking abilities. But do they always do so? First of all, let's agree that by lower levels today, we will understand A1 to B1 levels according to common European framework of reference. And due to a limited amount of time available today, we'll only focus on activities suitable for adults, young adults, and teenagers. And I hope to be able to tell you about at least 4 or 5 activities. While preparing this talk, I asked 17 newer and less experienced colleagues of mine about typical characteristics of lower level learners, and here are 3 most commonly mentioned ideas. You can see them on the slide. Most common teachers' assumptions tell us that lower level learners don't have enough language resources to communicate messages accurately, which means that they either make mistakes in what they already know or don't know certain grammar and vocabulary yet. Lower level learners can speak about basic topics only, that is, topics covered in the syllabus, and they need support and scaffolding to be able to communicate effectively. By support, they mostly meant a lot of drills and arguably speaking activities focusing on one language point at a time. For example, giving a monologue about your typical day using the present simple tense, the activity we all know really, really well. Well, I can't agree more. Being at lower levels of language command is an endless struggle to express oneself and to be understood. As I'm still there, I still know what it means. But there is something we teachers sometimes forget about. Yes, our lower level learners don't have language resources to communicate messages accurately, but in fact, they have ideas and opinions and desire to communicate. And is it true that they can speak about topics which were covered in the syllabus only? In fact, outside the classroom, if they really have to do so, they're able to cope with real-life challenges. And yes, they do need support and scaffolding, but they don't need the drills so much. They rather need encouragement and effective speaking strategies and also chances to develop their fluency. Do we give them these chances? So in order to maximize the outcomes of my talk and help you, my listeners, follow the talk, I'm going to give away the take-home messages straight away and demonstrate what I mean later. So this is what I wanted to tell you today. As babies learn to communicate their messages effectively way before they learn to do it accurately, would you agree with me? The same natural order of gaining language expertise and confidence, in my opinion, can motivate learners in our normally accuracy-dominated classrooms. So I would believe that fluency before accuracy is a lovely strategy with lower-level learners as it works in real life. Also, when someone truly cares, they make an effort but not an excuse. And therefore, I believe that students will open up and have something to say if an activity carries an aspect of personal relevance. And if students will have to use English outside the classroom and solve, let me highlight it once again, real-life problems, then it's essential that the activities students are offered in the classroom contain real-life components. And the last one, the last message, that speaking goes hand in hand with listening. Well, not much to be commented on here. When speaking, we need a sense of audience. We need to know that somebody hears our messages and cares. Let me show you a couple of activities suitable for lower levels, which features the takeaway messages mentioned in the slide. As I said, we are not going to reinvent the wheel, but we'll try to spice the activities we already know with elements of real life and motivation to participate and succeed. The first activity I would like to share with you is called a yes or no game. Basically, it's an improved analog of a well-known interview where students have to ask each other pre-designed getting to know you questions, or an analog of a find someone who activity where students again have to ask each other pre-designed, pre-described questions. In yes-no game, students work in pairs and sit back to back. As you can see in the photo, each student has two cards, namely yes and no. The teacher announces a statement, and students have to make an assumption if this information is true or false about their partner, about someone who is sitting right behind them. Examples of such statements could be anything, but I chose the easiest one, like, my partner comes from a big family. My partner does sport more than twice a week. Or my partner is a vegetarian. Or my partner is afraid of heights, etc., etc., etc. The statements can cover any topic you find relevant in your current classroom and can involve any grammar you feel is relevant for your learners at the moment. So the teacher announces a statement and students have to make an assumption. Yeah? Without looking at each other and talking to each other yet, students take a moment or two to make an educated guess or a wild guess and lift a corresponding card. And then they can see what their partner thinks about them. This is when students actually get a chance to start talking to each other and explain their guesses. I thought you do sport more than twice a week because look at your muscles. You must like the gym, for example. Then they have to find out the truth, if it is really so. And then they can ask each other about any other details that you'd like to know about each other. So that's basically it. You can see that there is not much preparation needed for that. And now a bit of thinking. Yeah, that's how it happens. Now a bit of thinking behind this activity. So the yes-no game engages the idea of a public image. And we all either already have our public image or we want to have one. Thus, it adds personal relevance to the activity. Moreover, it reflects the real-life thing we do, and we do judge people by appearances. We make assumptions based on our prior knowledge and based on our observations, and then we behave accordingly and choose topics to speak about with people. Secondly, it evokes students' natural interest to ask questions and check their predictions, and therefore the motivation to listen comes naturally. Linguistically speaking, the activity pushes students beyond one sentence and also forces them to go beyond simple sentences like, I thought or I think you like going to the gym because you have big muscles. That's already an attempt at constructing more complex sentences. At lower levels, that's very important. And the yes-no game can be used for any topic, for any language area, and at any stage of the course. And it can even be repeated in the same lesson. That's what I like about it. You can repeat the same activity in the same lesson with the same statements if students change pairs, and you can repeat the whole activity again. This time, students will already know what is expected from them, and they will try to study their new partner visually before they will have to make predictions. So it will give them a little bit of preparation time. Another very common speaking activity is all sorts of describing pictures. No one would argue that we do it a lot in our language classrooms, right? So let's speak about describing pictures. And indeed, in the era of social networks, pictures started playing a paramount role and became an indispensable means of creating biographies. We all do create biographies in social networks, and some of us spend hours planning their next look and taking a decent photo, which will bring them another portion of likes. We would make a huge mistake if we didn't use them in teaching, wouldn't we? However, there are some real-life implications which are often forgotten and ignored when designing classroom activities using photos. And here they are. In real life, if both conversation partners can see a photo, there is actually no need to describe what is depicted on the photo, based on the assumption that we can see the same thing. If one partner still decides to describe a photo, there is actually no authentic need for the second partner to listen to this description. So the interlocutor can fly away in their thoughts. But if both conversation partners can see a photo and they still decide to talk about it, they usually talk about the information in the photo or feelings conveyed by the image rather than describe it. Taking the above said into account, I will share with you two speaking activities involving pictures. The first one is called informative photos. For this activity, students are asked to choose 2, 3, 4 photos from their mobile phone storage. And the photos should carry potentially useful information for other group members. Therefore, the activity is called informative photos. So that's a key element. The photos should carry potentially useful information for other group members. You teachers can either specify the topic, for example, work-life balance, you can specify the topic, and each student will have to try and find or take informative photos on the topic. Or if you trust your students can do it themselves, they can decide themselves what to talk about. They can choose their topic for themselves. Do you need an example? I'm sure you do. And here is my collection of informative photos on the topic on holiday with a baby. So these photos hopefully will tell you about a holiday destination I personally could recommend for a family with a baby. Once again, it was purely my decision whether to focus on a paradise vacation or a disastrous one, because the topic sounds a little bit too general, like on holiday with a baby. I chose to focus on positive aspects of that. So if students know the concept of informative photos as sources of potentially useful information, they will be intrinsically motivated to find out more about it. What can we do about it? We can give students time to interview each other, find out whatever information they want. In this particular case, with my photos, it could be information, for example, about the country, hotel, season, prices, weather, food, facilities in the hotel, extra tours, evening activities, flights, visas, and whatnot, etc., etc., etc. An important comment is that as a teacher, I would be sitting among other students and listening attentively with sincere interest and not attempting to correct mistakes. As a feedback, I would ask students what information they found relevant and why, and would save error correction and language analysis for later, not to break the flow of communication. And once again, this activity, informative photos, hits all 4 takeaway messages I mentioned at the beginning. So first of all, it's an exchange of personal experiences, because all photos were taken by me or from my mobile phone storage. And again, it adds an element of personal relevance. Definitely it evokes students' natural interest to ask questions and collect potentially useful information, because that's real life, and the motivation to listen and to remember this information comes naturally. Once again, this activity can be used for any topic, like holidays, cooking, fears, schools, presents, you name it, it can be there. It can be used for any language area and at any stage of the course as well. It can be repeated many times throughout the course. And as a variation of it, instead of doing it as an interview, from time to time, you could ask your students to prepare a monologue, a presentation on the topic based on 3 informative photos. But let's not forget that we often have to teach students describe what is depicted in the photo, because this is a skill widely tested in a number of exams, particularly at lower levels. To beat the meaningless boredom of doing mechanical descriptions, I suggest the activity called invisible photos. So in this activity, each student has to choose a photo from their personal collection, which contains a number of details. Like this. Here is my photo. Can you see me in the photo? So if you look at the photo, you will notice that it has a foreground, a background, some objects, some people doing actions, emotions, colors, and also weather conditions depicted. So students choose their own photo, and you will ask your students to scrutinize their own photo carefully and memorize as many details as they can without showing their photo to anyone else. As soon as everybody is ready, hand out each student a blank piece of paper and tell them that this is their photo now. A blank piece of paper is a photo now. Ask students to write their name at the back of the paper just to make sure they can identify this photo later. So the activity itself is basically a mingle where students have to meet a new partner each time, show their papers as if they were photos, and describe the photos in detail. Look, they are showing each other blank papers and describing them as if they were photos, the ones they memorized at the previous stage. Their partner, of course, will have to listen carefully and try to remember as much information as possible, just the way Patrizia and Adam are doing in the photos right now, you see? So having described pictures, pictures in inverted commas, having described pictures to each other, your students will have to swap blank papers. And now they have a new photo in their hand. It's not their photo anymore. This is somebody else's photo. Now they have to find a new partner and repeat the same procedure, but this time they will have to describe a new photo they're holding from memory. You can run this activity until blank papers come back to their owners, obviously accompanied by completely messed up descriptions, having probably very little to do with the original photo. And as a feedback, they can show original photos to each other and compare what details were lost in the course of activity. So what is the thinking behind this activity? While doing so, students decide themselves what photo to choose and what photo to describe. Again, this is an element of personal relevance. It saves teachers preparation time, which is important, of course, and generates a variety of topics, a variety of vocabulary and language structures to use, because you can never know what photo comes next. Again, it creates authentic need to describe a photo in detail because your partner can't really see it. And the motivation to listen comes naturally because your students know they will have to describe the same blank paper in a minute. This type of practice also develops real-life communication strategies, like, for example, asking for repetition if they haven't got anything, or for clarification, back channeling. That is the way of showing they've understood and they're following the description, etc., etc., etc. I guess I will only have time for the last activity, And this activity will have to deal with real-life conversations. We often talk that in real life we find it very hard to have a conversation with other people. I'm sorry. So what do teachers usually believe about having real-life conversation at lower levels is that lower-level learners will only get into very common, regularly repeated situations, which will involve using more or less the same functional language, the same vocabulary and structures, and therefore teachers make assumptions that these conversations can be practiced in role plays, because memorization of lines guarantees successful communication in real life. For example, if you think about a real life conversation, which happens to me every month at the hairdressers, in the screen you can see a dialogue which I found online. Yeah, have a second look through. So here is an example of a functional dialogue which can happen between a hairdresser and a customer, a client. So what can we do with it in the classroom? We can read the dialogue together, we can practice it in pairs, practice with a new partner. Then we can turn the dialogue into a semi-scripted dialogue where students can substitute some vocabulary with what they need, what services they need or colors, and practice with a partner, and then practice again with a new partner, and then role play in front of the class. And we teachers will be sure that now they can do it effectively. But is that it? Does it guarantee successful participation in such a conversation in real life? My answer, the answer of a person who lives in Austria and who has to do simple everyday things in German, which is not even my first foreign language, my answer is no, it does not guarantee any communication success at all. Why? Because real-life conversation normally happens after all these formalities in the slide are finished. Speaking about going to the hairdresser, it takes me 2 hours each time to have my long hair dyed and cut, and these 2 hours are always filled with small talks and unprepared conversations on a variety of topics. Some of these topics are in the slide now. That's interesting that these conversations with the hairdresser and other people at the beauty parlor start spontaneously. There are no pre-described lines, there is no agreement about who will start talking, which topic to discuss first, how to respond, and what to do if speakers dry up for a moment, or even 20 minutes in a row, and this is real life. Why don't we take it into account as well? So my idea is the following. Having rehearsed and practiced the main dialogue, which you can see in the slide now, the one I mentioned before, I would encourage students to role play getting and providing the service as well. One student would be a client, he'd be sitting on the chair, while their partner, a hairdresser, would be standing behind. I would ask students to try and keep the conversation going for at least 5, 7, 10, 15 minutes. It depends on your students and depends on their confidence and language level. And again, depending on my students, I would either put a list of topic on the desk in front of them to refer to when they need ideas, when they are ready to dry up, when the conversation is ready to dry up. Or with stronger students, I would encourage them to rely on their own resources. So what is the thinking behind this activity? Again, students decide themselves on the topic they want to discuss, on the content of their messages, on the order of participation, on how they will recover the conversation if it dries up. Again, it adds personal relevance and also creates authentic need to keep the conversation going by means of asking questions, commenting, exchanging opinions, initiating and maintaining the conversation, or widening the scope of conversation if necessary. Again, it creates authentic need to listen and respond properly. And here is my key idea, that in this type of conversation, it's fluency that matters, not accuracy. Therefore, I would not interfere with my error correction. Definitely, I would be monitoring closely and collect ideas for later focus on language, but later possibly even in the next lesson, not to interrupt the flow of conversation. Because what is really important with lower levels is the feeling of success and achievement. This feeling, yes, I can. I've just done it. I guess I don't have any more time for other activities I prepared for you. Let me just repeat again the takeaway messages I wanted to tell you about today. And meanwhile, I will leave my comments for those of you who would like to have a conversation with me later on the topic. So my takeaway messages were that fluency at lower levels matters more than accuracy. So it should come before accuracy, because this is a natural way we acquire languages. Your speaking activities have to carry personal relevance in order to be motivating and encouraging. And speaking activities have to add a real-life component. And also speaking goes hand in hand with listening. So if you've designed a fantastic activity which does not encourage students to listen to each other, I would say think again. Thank you very much. I guess that's all I have time for now. And if you have any questions, I'm here available to answer them. Thank you.
I'm back here with you now, Natalia. That was incredible. I really like seeing those presentations that focus on the more practical side of things that you can do with students, and so those really key strategies and tips. Hey, here's a game. Here's how you do it. Those are always really, really great to see. So I was looking through the comments as you were doing your presentation. There's definitely some questions here for you. So one of the first ones is, what's your favorite task to give to students for speaking?
Well, that's very difficult to answer, because as one of the previous speakers mentioned, students are different, and they have different needs, and they have different levels of motivations and other characteristics. My favorite task would be anything personal that would touch upon, or that would tap into emotion, and people would say, hey, I've got something to tell you.
Great. Okay. No, that's interesting. I like that.
Thank you, Justin.
Another question that we have for you is, okay, so when those tasks that you were talking about, when you're explaining to students what you want them to do, so when you're giving them instructions, are you doing that in their L1 or L2? So in their native language or in English? And what do you recommend for that?
Difficult to say. Definitely if it is required to do it in L1 and there is no other way of doing so, you can. Nobody will kill you for that. But I'm currently working in the context where in my classroom there can be people from 15 different countries, and I just can't know all L1s. So I have to do it in L2. Therefore, I normally plan my instructions carefully. I make sure that I can demonstrate what I want them to do, and that's it. It does the work.
Okay, so you do use Russian then sometimes with beginners?
Well, if I teach a group of Russian students, I can. But now I'm living in Austria, so it's very hard to use my Russian here.
Fair enough. And one person here is asking if you could kindly clarify and justify the idea of prioritization of fluency versus accuracy.
Yeah, that's how babies learn languages, right? First, they learn to communicate messages, and their language structures are very incorrect, absolutely incorrect. But they're motivated to get what they want. Therefore, they try out things how to communicate their messages. A couple of years later, they will learn how to do it accurately. More than that, now living in a foreign country and having to learn languages, I have to tell you that not being a baby anymore, I'm still going through the same stages. And if my teachers insist on saying a correct phrase in order to get what I want, and namely buy a piece of bread, a loaf of bread, or a cup of coffee, come on, I get discouraged. Yeah, first I have to find the courage to get what I want, and then ask my teacher, how do I say it correctly?
Makes sense. Yeah, no, absolutely. It can always be sometimes a little bit intimidating, right? So, another question was, when you're working with students and their mistakes, do you correct them right away, or do you do it after an activity, or how do you address that?
It depends on your aim. Again, if it is a motivating speaking activity, we want our learners to speak. If your aim is not to interrupt the flow of communication, if your aim is to create this flow of communication, first of all, I wouldn't interrupt that. Only in case where mistakes impede communication and there is clearly misunderstanding between the two people communicating, I would jump in and say, haha, this is how you say that.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would save it for later.
Just like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And my last question for you is, and I saw this come up for a couple of people, how can we help our students if they are shy or super introverted? How do you get them speaking? How do you get them to come out of their shell?
Those people who ask me that question, you're most welcome to get in touch with me. That was the last activity which I didn't have time to show. I will tell you in person about that. But anyway, give them silent time, preparation time, yeah? Because very often they are not shy. They just need more time to put their ideas and thoughts together. And secondly, when planning your speaking activities, make sure that during the lesson, you can break these activities into mini stages. Before each mini stage, you can jump in and give them a hint what to speak about and how people speak about that. And then they will try and solve this mini task. Before you jump in again, give them a hint how to solve this task, and then carry on in this way.
Okay, that's neat. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think that, especially reading the comments here and whatnot, people really loved your presentation, really loved your speech. That's awesome to hear.
My huge pleasure. Thank you so much, Justin.
Absolutely. Other than that, have yourself a great day, and thank you so much for taking the time to come and see us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.